Ever hopped on a friend's bike only to have the handlebars come loose?
Mm.
Scary, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now imagine that, but you're on a sailboat and the handlebars are actually the mast holding everything up.
Right.
That's the nightmare scenario we're diving into today, inspecting a used sailboat's standing rigging.
Yeah, and it's a scenario that plays out all too often, unfortunately.
And no one wants a front row seat to a dismasting, right? We're talking potential danger, major damage to the boat.
Not to mention the cost of repairs. A new mast and rigging can set you back thousands.
Thousands, easy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're officially putting on our inspector hats. You're the expert. I'm the curious friend along for the ride. Walk me through it. Where do we even begin?
Well, unlike Sherlock Holmes, we'll need more than just a magnifying glass. Although, surprisingly, a bit of toilet paper does come in handy.
Wait, what? Okay, you've got to explain that one.
Patience, my friend. We'll get to the toilet paper trick soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
First, let's break down the main players in this system.
All right, so we're talking about the standing rigging, the network of cables and metal bits that keep the mast pointing skyward.
Exactly. And while the big, obvious parts are important, it's often the tiniest, easily overlooked elements that can spell disaster. A single corroded pin, a worn-out terminal.
Kind of like a chain reaction waiting to happen.
Precisely.
Right.
So we'll start with a visual inspection, but we're also going to get up close and personal with the rigging feeling for things our eyes might miss.
Sounds more intriguing by the minute.
Yeah.
So should we picture ourselves on the deck of this hypothetical used sailboat? What's the first thing we're checking?
Imagine you're looking at the boat from a distance. Do things look symmetrical? Are the stays, those cables running forward from the mast, doing what they should? Or are they sagging like a tired rubber band?
Okay, so symmetry is key. We're looking for anything out of alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Then as we get closer, we're checking the stays and shrouds for signs of corrosion. Even though sailboat rigging is typically stainless steel, it's still vulnerable in a marine environment.
Salt water is brutal.
Indeed. Our source material talks about crevice corrosion and pitting.
Okay, those sound like serious conditions. Break it down for me. What are we dealing with here?
So crevice corrosion happens in those tiny gaps where there's limited oxygen, like between a wire and its terminal. It's insidious because you might not see it until the damage is severe. Pitting, on the other hand, looks like tiny holes or craters in the metal. And both types of corrosion can significantly weaken the rigging.
Okay, that's starting to make sense. But if it's hidden, how do we even spot it?
That's where our trusty toilet paper comes in. Wrap a piece around a stay or shroud and run it up and down. Those microscopic cracks or broken wires that you might not see will snag on the toilet paper, giving you an early warning sign.
Wow, that's brilliant. I never thought of that. So, visual inspection, check.
Yep.
Toilet paper test, check. What's next on our used sailboat detective mission?
Chain plates.
Chain plates.
They're easy to overlook because they're often partially hidden, but they're absolutely critical.
Chain plates. Remind me what those are again.
They're like the anchors of the rigging. They connect the stays and shrouds to the hull of the boat, transferring all those immense forces.
Okay, so we're talking about massive stress on these chain plates. What kind of trouble can they run into?
Leaks are a major concern. Chain plates are usually bolted through the deck, and if those seals fail, water can seep in, leading to rot and delamination.
Delamination, that sounds expensive.
It can be. So when you're inspecting chain plates, look for any signs of previous repairs. That's a red flag that there might be underlying issues.
So we're not just looking at the chain plates themselves, but also the surrounding area for signs of past water damage or shoddy repairs.
Exactly. It's all about connecting the dots and understanding the history of the boat. Now let's move on to another small but mighty component, turnbuckles.
Turnbuckles, those are the adjustable parts that let you fine-tune the tension of the rigging, right?
You've got it. They might look simple, but there's more to them than meets the eye. First, you've got open body and closed body turnbuckles. Open bodies are easier to inspect visually, but closed body ones do a better job of keeping out contaminants, which is crucial for longevity.
Speaking of contaminants, what's the best lubricant for these guys? Asking for a friend who may or may not be considering a life of sailing adventures.
Your friend is wise to ask. Teflon-based lubricant is the gold standard. It doesn't attract gunk like grease or oil, which can actually wear down those all-important threads.
Got it. Teflon, my new favorite word. What else should we be looking for when we're giving these turnbuckles the once-over?
Don't forget those tiny little safety pins.
Safety pins.
You'll find them on most turnbuckles, and they prevent the turnbuckle from loosening accidentally.
Wait, safety pins, like the kind you use on a diaper bag?
Yep, those ones. They might seem insignificant, but a missing safety pin is a major red flag. It suggests negligence and a lack of understanding of how crucial these small components are.
Okay, I'm definitely adding check for tiny safety pins to my mental checklist. What's next on our sailboat inspection extravaganza?
Well, we've covered the stays, shrouds, chain plates, and turnbuckles. I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, so to speak.
The elephant, you say? Don't tell me there are actual elephants involved in sailboat rigging.
Not quite. I'm talking about the mast itself. We can't forget about the big guy.
Of course. The towering giant upon which our sailing dreams depend.
So, when we're looking at a used sailboat mast, what are the telltale signs of trouble? Well, first and foremost, is it straight?
Okay.
Our source stresses the importance of checking for any bending or warping. If the mast isn't true, it can put uneven stress on the rigging, which, as we've discussed, is a recipe for disaster.
And I imagine corrosion is a factor here, too.
Absolutely.
Huh.
On unpainted aluminum masts, you're looking for pitting, those tiny holes or craters, and a white powdery substance, which is oxidized aluminum. A little bit is normal, but if it's excessive or accompanied by deep pitting,
That's a big nope. Should we be running for the hills at that point?
it's definitely a sign to pause and gather more information. A marine surveyor can help determine the severity of the corrosion.
Makes sense. So what about painted masts? Does the paint act like a suit of armor against this corrosion villain?
It can help, but paint can also hide problems. Look for bubbling or flaking paint, especially near fittings or welds. That's often a sign that corrosion is brewing underneath.
Like a ticking time bomb hidden beneath a pretty exterior.
A very accurate analogy.
Hmm.
And speaking of hidden dangers, we can't forget about galvanic corrosion. This happens when dissimilar metals, like stainless steel and aluminum, are in direct contact with each other.
Okay, I vaguely remember this from chemistry class. Something about electrons and disaster. Refresh my memory.
Basically, it's like a tiny battery forming where these metals meet, and that electrochemical reaction can cause one of the metals to corrode much faster than it normally would.
So we're talking about aluminum fittings on a stainless steel mast or vice versa.
Exactly. Those are prime spots for galvanic corrosion. You want to look for any signs of corrosion around those areas.
Got it. So we've tackled the stays, shrouds, chain plates, turnbuckles, and even the mast itself. Is there anything else on this used sailboat that needs our expert inspection?
We're getting there, but we can't forget about the welds, rivets, and the mast base.
Ah, right, those easily overlooked details that can make or break the deal.
Precisely. With welds, you want to pay close attention to the edges. Cracks often start there and radiate inwards.
So it's all about the subtle signs. Like you said earlier, we're playing detective here.
Exactly. And don't forget about the rivets. Mismatched rivets can be a telltale sign of past repairs and not necessarily the highest quality ones.
Starting to think I need to add a magnifying glass to my sailing gear shopping list.
It couldn't hurt. Now, let's talk about the mast base, that critical junction where the mast meets either the keel or the deck.
Two different setups, two different sets of things to look out for.
You got it. A keel-stepped mast, which is more common on larger sailboats, is mounted directly to the keel, the very bottom of the hull.
Makes sense. So what are the red flags for this type of mast step?
Corrosion at the base is a major concern. Since water can collect in the bilge, that's the lowest compartment inside the hull, where water tends to accumulate.
Not ideal to have a soggy bottom when you're relying on that mast to stay upright.
Definitely not. Now, a deck-stepped mast, more common on smaller boats, is mounted on the deck itself. This means the deck and supporting structure beneath it need to be incredibly strong and stable.
So we're talking potential issues with the bulkheads, those interior walls of the boat, or even the deck itself.
Precisely. Things like rot, delamination, or even just movement over time can compromise the integrity of the mast support, which could eventually lead to, well,
Let me guess. Catastrophic mast failure.
you said it. So when you're inspecting a deck-stepped mast, you're looking for any signs of warping, cracking, or movement in the mast base itself, as well as any suspicious signs in the surrounding deck and structure.
This is a lot to take in. It's amazing how many things can go wrong.
It can seem overwhelming, but remember, we're aiming to equip you with knowledge, not turn you into a certified marine surveyor overnight.
True enough. But speaking of overwhelming, we haven't even made it to the top yet. What's the game plan for inspecting the very top of the mast? Are we scaling this thing?
Unless you're a fan of heights and precarious balancing acts, I'd advise against it. For this part, we'll rely on our trusty binoculars.
Ah, the safer, less vertigo-inducing option. So what are we looking for from our ground-level vantage point?
Up at the top, you'll find the spreaders, those horizontal pieces that help support the mast and the forks, which are the metal fittings that attach the shrouds to the mast. We're looking for any signs of bending, cracking, or movement in those components.
And I'm guessing corrosion is still public enemy number one up there.
Absolutely, especially on sailboats that are frequently used in saltwater. Pay close attention to the areas around any fittings or connections, as those are prime spots for corrosion to start.
So we're playing detective once again, scanning the mast from top to bottom for any telltale signs of trouble.
Precisely. And don't forget to check the shrouds themselves, particularly if they're not wrapped with protective tape. Look for chafing or wear in the areas where they pass through the spreaders.
Okay, so we've covered the spreaders, the shrouds. Anything else lurking up there that we need to be aware of?
Good catch. The sheaves. It's easy to forget about those components, but they're important too. Make sure everything is securely mounted and in good working order.
So to sum it up, our final act of mast inspection involves channeling our inner eagle eye and scanning the very top for any signs of wear and tear, corrosion, or loose fittings.
Exactly. And with that, we've covered the standing rigging from the deck to the masthead.
Wow, I'm exhausted just thinking about all that inspection.
It's a workout for sure, but it's a small price to pay for peace of mind on the water.